Good morning, and good morning, Congressman.
Good morning, JB.
I want to know if really in your heart of hearts do you think that the fluctuation in the stock market last week, the sum total of that was because of the unrest in Europe? I really hope that that's not what you really feel.
Well, there's no question that the S&P report was, very destabilizing in terms of people's perception of, Washington and its ability to get things done. I mean, frankly, that's one of the reasons why I kind of held my nose and voted for the package, because I think that, it was a minute to midnight and we were at a point where, it's not a debate club down there and people have got to get things done. It's why I wish we were back down there right now, continuing to face, project, issues like transportation and others that are sitting there unfinished. So, I mean, the answer is I'm not going to totally say it had nothing to do with it, but I do think it is important to remember that what S&P was downgrading was the value of bonds, of Treasury bonds. And if you look at what happened last week, is that demand for those Treasury bonds didn't go down, it went up. Now, again, that doesn't mean I'm thinking, everything's fine and we don't have to worry about the public finances of this country. I'm a parent. I have a son who's 20, a daughter who's 16. This is not a trajectory that is good for them. And I realize that that's, the responsibility of people in Congress to fix. And I certainly think that, I'd be happy to sort of walk through some of the spending cuts that that I've supported. And again, I supported this package, which called for $1 trillion of upfront spending reductions. I do think at the end of the day, we have to have some balance in terms of getting to deficit reduction. We know that historically in terms of successful efforts to reduce the deficit in the past. I also just want to quickly mention from the prior call, August 23rd is actually the forum at Three Rivers Community College where the Navy will be there. It's a forum that starts, I think, 8 o'clock in the morning through 4 o'clock. Again, small businesses, we've got 80 to 100 have already signed up for it. And certainly you can call my office in Norwich at 860-886-0139 if people want more information. It's not just the Navy, it's SBA, it's USDA, it's a number of groups that do work with businesses.
All right, JB, anything else?
Well, Joe, you're closer to being like I am than the president is. You have a family, I have a young family. I have an income of combined income with my wife of less than $100,000. I do not have the resources to purchase T-bills. So that doesn't reflect my picture as a whole. You know what a gallon of milk costs, and you know what a gallon of gas costs. The president doesn't. The disconnect comes from the downgrade in the confidence of the average Joe, or in my case, the average Jim. I have so much money coming in a month, I need to be responsible and keep my bills paid. And that amount of money is not going up, but the amount of money that I have to pay is. So I think yesterday when we hear that the president's going out on a campaign trail as opposed to maybe showing some sincere compassion to the 19 SEALs that were lost, I think that for me, the disconnect comes when I see the president planning another vacation to Martha's Vineyard to a beautiful estate owned by a big donor. Joe Courtney's not going to Martha's Vineyard with his family. He'd probably like to, but he's not. You want to be in Washington working, but you can't, and those are the rules. Those are the rules under John Boehner. Those are the rules under Nancy Pelosi. That part is all the same. What doesn't change, and what I think is where we're stuck, is that the average guy sitting in his ripped Baca lounger watching the TV sees the same thing, and he sees the same thing that he doesn't want to see, and that is someone that's not engaged and can't relate to him.
Well, thank you. I mean, that's a very powerful description of the frustration that we hear every day on the phones when I'm around the district. And, I bought a, half gallon of milk the other night at the gas station, having already filled up, and certainly, my wife who works full time as a nurse practitioner, again with 2 kids, one who's in college, another one very shortly. I mean, it's we're facing a lot of those challenges, and I try and always look through that lens in terms of when I'm facing issues down in Washington, and nobody's perfect, but at the end of the day, that's. That what you described is the 2nd District of Connecticut, and in a very eloquent way.
Well, because we've said this for the longest time, and I know he's gone, and you mentioned some people out there holding signs about Dodd. I mean, I was willing to bet my year's salary against his that he couldn't tell you within a dollar what a loaf of bread or a gallon of milk, because there's a disconnect with a lot of people in Washington, and I'm sure you see that a lot. I mean, I don't know, you don't have to comment on who's who, but I know there's got to be that disconnect with the average person who doesn't know, the average person who's living his life 9 to 5, going to work, making $35,000-$40,000 a year. People down in Washington, they have no clue on that guy.
Well, one of the things that I am now part of in Washington is that I was appointed to the Ethics Committee, which is an interesting place because it's a completely 50-50 committee. You don't have majority control either party. There was a letter to the editor recently from one of my Tea Party friends who was saying that I was rewarded with that committee report. Usually most people, when they go on that committee, it's like they feel like they've been sentenced to that committee. But frankly, you do see some examples, and I can't disclose it, obviously, because all the work is confidential,
right,
of stuff that members engage in, and it's appalling.
I wouldn't doubt it. It would be. I mean, listen, we hear it every day. It leaks out from different sources about different politicians, and it is kind of sad. All right, let me ask you. We'll change gears a little bit. We can go back to some of the economy stuff in just a second. But today, 28 states have challenged the constitutionality of Obamacare in court. Federal Circuit Court has struck down the central pillar of the law, holding that the individual's mandate unconstitutional. Looking back on the specifics of the bill, is this something that you would continue to support?
Well, again, remember, there's a disagreement with the courts. There was a Court of Appeals decision at the same level as the Virginia court that went the opposite direction. This is headed for the Supreme Court. It is not, what's interesting is that if you look at the decision that was just handed down, it was not the entire bill. It's the one issue of the individual mandate. And, we could spend hours discussing that. What I would say is that in terms of where Congress is right now, as I said during the last campaign, no piece of legislation is a perfect product. That we have got to be smart about looking at problems that were included in the package. One of them was the 1099 filing requirement, that businesses would have to file a 1099 for any purchase of goods and services of $600 and up. Again, as someone who is a small employer, I can completely understand what a nightmare that would have been. Again, it was supposed to start in 2013, and the good news is we repealed it. Mm-hmm. The two sides came together. Within the Connecticut delegation, to be perfectly honest with you, we did not vote as a block, even though, as you know, it's an all-Democratic delegation. But I voted yes to fix that flaw that's in the bill. And I think there are other areas that, we've got to continue to move forward on. I would say, though, that, we also fixed another gap, which was to make sure that TRICARE covered families up to age 26 coverage, because we had military families calling my office saying, well, if the private health insurance plans are now going to have age 26 coverage, like workers at EB or Pratt & Whitney or even a small business, why wasn't TRICARE included in that? And again, historically, it was because everyone wanted to leave veterans benefits and military benefits completely out of the healthcare changes. But the fact is that was, a real glaring mistake, and we fixed it. Mm-hmm. In December, we added an amendment to TRICARE so that now age 26 coverage is included. To me, that's the right thing, and is in terms of how Congress should approach this issue.
You think the bones, though, of this whole Obamacare, do you think it's the direction that you want to go in? Listen, I've said this before. There really is no answer for this, because I think it's an impossible puzzle to try to piece together. You think about it, you want to set up a situation where you certainly don't want to mandate anybody owns anything. That's not what we're about as far as a free country. But at the same time, somebody breaks their leg and goes stumbling into an emergency room with no insurance. Well, who pays for that? So there is no real. It's very, very difficult to deal with this. But do you think that Obamacare, the way it is set up, even with the additions and subtractions you guys have put through the ringer there, do you think this is the direction that is going to be the answer here?
Well, again, I think there are many pieces to it. And I think that if you look at, for example, seniors now are getting help with the donut hole when they fall into the 100% deductible for their prescription drugs because of Obamacare, because of the Affordable Care Act. They are now getting assistance. We have data now, right, Connecticut-specific data of seniors now who are not having to bear the whole brunt of falling into that donut hole. We have got annual checkups now covered by Medicare. Cancer screenings, we had a town hall up in Wyndham back at the end of June, where a doctor came and talked about the fact that because of those annual checkups, she was able to detect cancer in a couple of her patients that otherwise she never would have had the opportunity to do. She saved lives because of that. And it saved money, by the way, too, because they were able to do quick day surgeries on a bladder cancer that, otherwise would have been, in hospital surgery. So, there are definitely, I think, some positive results that we're starting to see. But as I, believe as a 58-year-old who's been involved in both private sector and public sector, nothing is ever final, particularly in healthcare.
Right.
My children and grandchildren will be debating healthcare. And the fact is that we've got to just be smart and figure out the positive things like the donut hole help, the age 26 coverage, and fix the mistakes like the 1099 filing requirement as a way of trying to make this a stronger country.
All right, we have an email question from Wally, which was, why have unions been given an exemption not to join Obamacare, 1,000 other groups as well?
Well, there's certainly, I'm not 100% sure what Wally was referring to, but there definitely are questions about the purchasing exchanges, which are these, in fact, Connecticut's purchasing exchange is meeting for the first time next week, which, again, is going to be similar to what the federal employees have, where you get a menu of different private health insurance plans to pick from. The exchanges go online in 2014. Employers 50 or less first year, and then it's going to, as time goes on, larger employers are going to be included. Certainly larger unionized employers who fall into those triggers of size are not excluded from being in those exchanges. But if the employer and the union can basically say that they would just as soon continue with the benefits that they have, they can. Really that should be a principle here, is that if you've got existing health insurance coverage that meets a basic level, that there really should be no requirement that forces the employer and their staff to necessarily join the purchasing exchanges.
All right. We have Rita on the phone. Rita is calling us from Pomfret. Rita, good morning. You're on with Congressman Joe Courtney. You want to talk about a balanced budget amendment?
Yes, I just have one question for Congressman Courtney. Good morning, Congressman
Courtney. Good morning, Rita Conrad. All right. Good to hear from you.
You're the one who said I was... I am the lady that wrote you the letter regarding the ethics committee appointment, but that's not my
right.
That's not my here to pick this morning. I called to ask you if you do or do you not support a balanced budget amendment to the U.S. Constitution, and if you do not, why not? And then I'm going to get off the air and listen to your answer.
Sure.
Thank you very much, Lee, for letting me call in.
Go right ahead.
Well, again, I can't help but comment that Rita was the one who said I was rewarded with the ethics committee, which, again, I showed that letter to some members on the committee who, we're finding that pretty amusing because nobody regards being on that committee as a reward. The balanced budget amendment, which was part of the Boehner package that was voted on Thursday before the final package was passed, was, in my opinion, not a balanced budget amendment. It basically said that, yes, the books have to be balanced over a certain period of time, but it also included a lot of provisions that said you could not change revenue levels or revenue rates and structures without a 3/5 majority. When did that become a principle for America? I mean, the founding fathers put majority rule into the Constitution. We have operated for over 200 years with that principle. There's been only one area, which is approval of a treaty, where you have to have a 2/3 majority in the Senate, that the founding fathers said that you needed a supermajority. So that the ethanol tax credits, which farmers up in your area complain about bitterly, Congress would need a 3/5 majority to repeal that kind of a tax credit. That is not a balanced budget amendment. That's something that is just changing all the rules to protect corporate tax breaks, and really, in my opinion, is just not the kind of balance that people are looking for.
How about a legitimate balanced budget amendment?
It's the problem I have with it is that and again, if it doesn't have that kind of bells and whistles with super majorities and stuff, which again, that was what we voted on.
Right.
We've never had to have that before. Again, it's important to remember, we talked about this earlier in the show, is that we were in balance as a country in 1999, 2000, and 2001, and we did it without a balanced budget amendment. We did it with budget rules that George Herbert Walker Bush, to his credit, agreed to.